Hello, I'm Rebecca Fago, the Aquarium Director at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. And I am here today to talk about something that's precious to my heart, the ocean and climate change. Believe it or not, climate change and the ocean are inextricably linked. The ocean actually takes out 20 to 30% of all the carbon that is burned through fossil fuel emissions. It also absorbs literally 90% of the sun's heat, and it distributes that all around the world through ocean currents. Right now, our ocean is becoming warmer and warmer every year, and it's actually acidifying, which is called ocean acidification. That is happening from all the carbon dioxide, from all that carbon and fossil fuel emissions being poured into our atmosphere and being literally absorbed by our ocean. There are so many things that are contributing to the ocean being at a faltering point. We literally have taken and taken and taken from the ocean, thinking it's this infinite resource that can't possibly falter. But between the warming of our oceans, man-made pollution, overfishing, and all the other man-made activities that are taking away from our ocean's ability to absorb carbon, we are now at this tipping point in society and in the world. And we are more dependent on the ocean today than ever before to literally protect humanity itself from climate change. Believe it or not, the ocean creates 50% of all the oxygen we breathe. We probably like breathing, right? All marine life uses oxygen to breathe as well. And so we can't continue inundating the ocean in the way we have if we want a healthy civilization to continue to exist into the future. There are major things we can do to protect the ocean, but we need to do it now. And it needs to be a global, concerted, international effort, which is actually what the Paris Climate Agreement is all about. A major thing we need to do, and it's a hard one, but it's something we have to do now, is we need to move away from using dirty fossil fuels and move towards more natural resources that nature so abundantly provides us. We can do that now. We also need to start protecting more areas of the ocean. Us scientists have a goal that by 2030, 30% of all ocean will be protected as marine protected areas. That will give the ocean a chance to literally recover from everything I've mentioned above. If it can replenish itself, it can actually heal and help us fight climate change for the future. We do that by, like I said, moving away from the dirty fossil fuels and towards clean energy. Our goal by 2030 is to have 30% of all oceans protected. So these marine protective areas will allow fish to come back, corals to thrive, mangroves to be replanted. We've been taking away mangroves as a clear example of what's harming our planet. Believe it or not, mangroves actually store a lot of this carbon that fossil fuels are emitting. So you take away the mangroves, how are we removing the carbon? And the very carbon itself is actually an ocean web of food organisms that now takes that carbon and restores it to the deep sea, helping keep life on this planet thriving. So the rainforests of the sea must be protected. And that's not just mangroves, that's also coral reefs, seagrass bed, and saltwater marshes. Not only that, it protects all of our coastal communities from storm surge, which I'm sure you've seen the news lately. We've had a lot of unprecedented climate events. This is all directly connected to climate change. So we must act now. And there are so many things we can do on an individual level. The main thing is we really need to reduce our carbon footprint. We can do that by simple things like reduce, reuse, recycle. Skip the straw challenge. Skip the plastic straw if you're going to Wendy's. You don't need it. Bring a metal straw around with you. Use reusable cloth bags. Another major thing that's destroying our coral reefs right now, believe it or not, is the chemicals in the sunscreen we put on. You can buy ocean safe sunscreen now that it's same price as the other sunscreen, and it's not only better for your skin, it's better for our ocean. Another major thing we need to do is we need to reduce chemical fertilizers we're using on our lawn or eliminate them altogether. That is actually causing nutrient runoffs into the ocean. That's causing what we call dead zones, literally zones in the ocean that are deprived of oxygen, thus killing all the marine life in its path. Not to mention, it's not that nice when we go to the beach and we can't breathe because there's a huge algal bloom happening and it's killing all the marine life. There's dead fish all over the beach. Not exactly what we want. Doesn't help our recreation with scuba diving, snorkeling, fishing, all of these things will be deeply affected. And not to mention that's a $140 billion a year industry. So another reason to protect it. Other things we can do is don't use as much water. Water is not an abundant resource. We actually have a limit to how much we should use. So these are little things you can do. Another thing I always tell my guests is if you do eat seafood, there's sustainable seafood and there's unsustainable seafood. If you go to a place called seafoodwatch.org, they have these lovely little packages where you can print them out and fold them up and put them in your wallet and in your purse. Next time you're buying seafood or going out to eat, you can look and see what's harming our ocean, what's actually not harming our ocean, and pick from the not harming aisle. That actually makes a huge difference, believe it or not. Because not only is climate change kind of putting us to this tipping point that we're not coming back from, it's the overfishing, it's the pollution. We're saying that if we don't make these changes now, we are looking at a worldwide fishery collapse by 2048. That also means that all world's coral reefs, mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass beds will be in dire straits by that time. Believe it or not, that's only 27 years away. So we don't have much time. We must act now. It must be a global, international, conservative effort, just like the Paris Climate Agreement, so that we can change things for the better. Because just like a healthy immune system can fight the virus COVID better than an unhealthy immune system, a healthy ocean can protect humanity itself. Thank you so much, and we're gonna show you Alyssa's video right now about corals and why they're so important to our ocean.
Hi guys, my name is Alyssa. I'm the senior aquarist here at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about coral. For starters, coral is not a plant and it's not just a pretty rock. It is actually an animal. Coral belongs to the same phylum as jellyfish and anemones. Coral itself is made up of hundreds of little organisms called polyps. Polyps are these small little sac-like animals that have a mouth surrounded by tentacles, and oftentimes these tentacles have small stinging cells on them called pneumatocysts. These stinging cells, these pneumatocysts, help protect the coral polyp, they help defend it, they also help it obtain food, although most corals do have a secondary way of obtaining food, and this is through a symbiotic relationship with a photosynthetic dinoflagellate called zooxanthellae. A symbiotic relationship is a relationship in which both individuals, both organisms, receive something beneficial from that relationship. So in the case of the zooxanthellae, it gets a nice safe home. It actually gets to live within the coral polyp, away from predators, away from commotion, and in return, the coral polyp gets some of that energy that zooxanthellae creates from photosynthesis. Interestingly enough as well, most stony coral actually receive most of their coloration from the zooxanthellae. Without zooxanthellae, a lot of our stony corals would be this kind of stark white color, which is why when corals get stressed, they will sometimes actually expel their zooxanthellae. The individual coral polyps will spit it out, and it leaves behind this white kind of skeletal structure. That skeletal structure is made up of something called calcium carbonate, and the little coral polyp actually creates this structure. It surrounds itself in it to give it some protection and some support. So when that zooxanthellae is gone, exposing that kind of white skeletal structure, that's something we call coral bleaching, and it can actually be detrimental to the coral. If a coral goes for too long without its zooxanthellae, it could actually die. And there are many factors, many stressors that can cause coral bleaching. One of the most common ones, is increased water temperatures within our oceans today. And coral bleaching in general is just one of the many factors that are affecting corals negatively today. There's many natural factors, even anthropogenic factors. Anthropogenic factors are human-caused factors, so that's things like pollution, things like overfishing, destructive fishing practices, even destructive diving and boating practices can harm coral, and it's harming coral all around the world today. We're losing our coral. And if you're wondering why that matters, maybe you're sitting at home, you're not even near an ocean, you maybe don't even know how to swim, I'll tell you why. Corals, just to put it into perspective, only cover 1% of our entire ocean floor. 1%. And most of our planet is ocean, so that's not very much. But within that 1% lies 25% of all marine life. 1/4 of all known marine life depends on this 1% of coral. That's amazing. And coral reefs and all marine life really is interconnected. That means that each individual step, no matter where it is on the hierarchy, really depends on all of the steps being beneficial in order for its overall survival. So if we see a coral collapse, we're likely going to see a total marine system collapse. And if you're still wondering why that matters, take a deep breath. We all like breathing. It's nice. But oceans actually provide more oxygen than all of the Amazon rainforest put together. So we really do need a healthy ocean in order for even our survival. And there's things we can even do from home to help, especially since we're all probably home a little bit more than we used to be now, maybe binge watching too much Netflix. But if you want to switch gears, maybe watch something a bit more educational, there's an excellent documentary actually called Chasing Coral. You can watch it on Netflix, because honestly the first step towards stewardship and to even helping is education and educating yourself and learning something more. So I hope all of you have maybe learned something about coral from me today. I thank you so much for joining me, and we hope to see you soon at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. Bye.
Thank you, Alyssa, for that awesome presentation on coral reefs. I just wanted to show you guys a couple of our tanks that we have here that I absolutely love at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. So behind me, we have our largest tank. This is our shipwreck exhibit. And if you're wondering, why is there a sunken ship in it? Well, there's a very good reason for that. As I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of habitat destruction, and fish populations have been decimated. And for years now, we've been actually sinking planes and ships and all kinds of things into the ocean. We have over 300 of these dive areas here in Florida. And it creates what we call an artificial reef system. So all kinds of animals, from lobsters to crabs to sharks to eels, will actually move into these artificial reefs. And so that's actually kind of helping sustain the ocean a little more, since the coral reefs are in such big trouble right now. So this is one of my favorite tanks, and that is just a great example. And coral, believe it, if it's the right material, can actually start to grow on some of these artificial reefs. So the shipwreck is a great example of this. This is our largest tank, and like I said, it's one of my favorites because it's got pretty much everything. We got lobsters, puffers, sharks, eels, barracuda, and this is literally what you would see living on an artificial reef. And now I'd like to take you guys over to another favorite of mine. This is our pop-up tank. The kids love this tank as well. You can literally pop up into it. But an example of why everything is interconnected that I wanted to kind of mention is these are corals. So what herbivores do, which a lot of my fish here are herbivores or omnivores, is they actually eat the algae that grows on the coral reefs in the ocean. And that provides food for them, and it also keeps the coral reefs healthy. So if you eliminate and decimate these fish populations, algae will continue to grow on these coral reefs and eventually suffocate them. They literally won't be able to get the oxygen, and the zooxanthellae living within their tissues will die. And that will cause a coral bleaching event, just like the warming oceans are causing. So every animal plays its part in the ocean. You can't take out the herbivores, the sharks, or any animal in the entire marine ecosystem, because you will have a domino effect when you do that. And that's a perfect example of one thing that helps the corals. The corals can't live without the fish, and vice versa. Lastly, I wanted to just thank you guys so much for coming to the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. We are so much about education, because honestly, if we don't continue to teach the younger generations about why the ocean is important, literally take a deep breath, that oxygen you're breathing, we want to sustain that. So we use these animals to teach you, to inspire you, and hopefully make you go home and want to make a difference for our oceans and for the planet and humanity itself. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much. And next up, we have a very special guest from the Reef Institute that's going to continue to teach you guys about climate change and why it matters. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Lenita Fix, and I am the Executive Director here at the Reef Institute. We are on a mission for coral conservation through education, research, and restoration. I'd like to begin with a little bit on what coral means to Florida. So I know Alyssa talked a little bit about coral and coral bleaching and climate change, and we're going to get more in depth about that in a moment or two. But coral is really important to the state of Florida. So Florida is obviously a peninsula, and I don't know if you realize this, but we are surrounded by coral on all three sides, actually. On the Gulf Coast, it's a deeper sea coral, but on the Atlantic side, we actually have something called the Florida Reef Tract. The Florida Reef Tract is 365 miles long. It's the third largest barrier reef in the world, and it's the only contiguous coral reef system along the continental US. What does that mean for us here in Florida? Some really important things. So what it means for us here in Florida is it creates economy through tourism and fishing. It also just really helps protect us. But on a very, very practical level, what coral does for us here in Florida is it is protecting our coastline from storm surge and just creating, just like it sounds like, it's creating a giant barrier for the state of Florida against hurricanes. And so when our coral starts dying, then it's a big issue. And our coral has really been under attack. NOAA actually estimates that our coral coverage in Florida is down to about 2% at this point. So a lot of our coral is really, really struggling, and it's really important to us. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in a moment, but let me give you a little bit of an overview of who we are. So what we do here at the Reef Institute is we really believe that research and education go hand in hand. We want to create a research mechanism that in a very applicable way is saving coral for the state of Florida. But then also we believe if we're not educating the public on how to care for coral and what that means, then we can't really, we can't make a change. So here's what that means, is that where you're standing right now is actually in our virtual education center. You're in front of our coral tank that we affectionately refer to as the show tank. These are actually all Pacific corals. So when Alyssa talked about Pacific corals before, and Rebecca was talking about corals at the South Florida Science Center, they were really talking about and showing you those Pacific corals. They're the corals that we usually identify as those really beautiful, brightly colored corals that have our clownfish around them. What we do is we work in virtual education, primarily live streaming from this facility with a lot of different animals to really educate the public on how to care for coral, what coral is, why we should care about it at all. I don't know if you even realize that coral is an animal. And so we just really, if you don't understand it, then you don't know you're supposed to take care of it. So we work with about 9,000 children a year, just live streaming to classrooms, literally all over the world. We actually have a class right now with Myanmar. So we are able to teach children all over the world about coral. But then we also get people outside. We do local snorkel trips. We help people just to get outside on the beach and understand beach ecology. We have partnerships with local hotels. We do all sorts of really fun things to help people have hands-on experiences to understand coral. So, do you want to know more about why climate change is affecting coral? Let's go visit with our marine veterinarian and lead research director, Dr. Charlie Gregory, and he's going to kind of get into those topics for you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Charlie Gregory. I'm a marine veterinarian here at the Reef Institute, and I'm pretty good at keeping corals healthy and happy using our amazing technology and a variety of help from aquarists, interns, and volunteers. We have a collection of corals that are belonging to this group of corals that have been rescued from Florida's reef tract. This tank right in front of me represents a half a dozen species of corals that are kind of in trouble in the ocean around here right now. Things like pollution and disease have contributed and actually worked tragically synergistically with global warming and made life difficult for corals in general. Around the world, we've lost something like 50%. It's up to maybe 60% now. In Florida, since the early 80s, we've lost 97, 98% of coral. The biggest coral colony died a few years ago. It was 400 years old. It had been here since before the United States existed. And a recent disease outbreak called stony coral tissue loss disease killed that coral. These corals were seed banking along with 20 other aquariums and zoos around the country as part of an American Zoological Association-led effort to keep the genetics alive. We're going to grow them, we might reproduce them, we're studying their genetics, and we want to make sure that when it's time to put them back, when the ocean is ready for them, we can grow them back very quickly and efficiently in restoration efforts. In the meantime, I'm feeding them, I'm giving them the exact wavelengths of light that they need, I'm giving them the right flow, and we're watching the chemistry, the calcium, and the buffering capacity of the water. I wanted to showcase our technology. We've got amazing lighting here. We've been supported with a variety of telecommunications devices that can communicate directly with me about the conditions of the coral tanks at any given time. So even if it's the middle of the night, if one of our dosers that injects chemicals into the water runs out, or there's water on the floor, or an electrical spike that turned out one of our pumps, I know it almost instantly. The importance of keeping these corals alive is utmost, because these corals really do represent the best chance for successful maintaining the coral reef tract in Florida. At the end of the day, the warming conditions of the world lead to a lot of unforeseen circumstances in the natural environment, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the coral. So as a safeguard, we are doing our best to keep these corals not only in controlled and very accommodating settings, but we're also learning a lot very quickly by communicating with all of our partnering institutions about how best to keep these corals alive and not only growing fast, but we're just starting to look at the reproduction of these corals, which is super exciting. At the end of the day, if we can reproduce these corals very quickly, natural selection might allow for us to select for corals that are more resilient to warmer ocean temperatures and more acidic conditions that often come with warmer temperatures. And so we'll potentially be able to find corals that actually can survive even against a lot of the challenges that are being faced as a result of global warming.
Coral only takes up 1% of the ocean. 25% of everything alive in the ocean at some point in its life is estimated to rely on a coral reef for survival. So if changing water temperatures, if ocean acidification, if increased disease begins and continues to take out our coral reef systems globally, the estimate currently is that 90% of all coral around the world will be gone by the year 2050. So that is in our children's lifetime that we're looking at. So what can we do? So we've shown you a couple of things that we're doing. We're a part of the Florida Coral Rescue Project, and we're actively seeking to bring corals in and rescue them from the wild. It's kind of considered like a Noah's Ark, is kind of the way that we look at it. But there are some other things that you can do. So here's one super simple thing that you can do. Change your sunscreen. I know that seems ridiculous, but chemical-based sunscreens have about 5 or 6 different chemicals in them that can affect things in the ocean and can directly affect corals. So what we want to do is not add anything else into the water that can affect corals. And as Dr. Gregory said, we don't even know with these rising ocean temperatures really how vulnerable our coral is. They're more vulnerable to disease, they're more vulnerable to bleaching, and so that just makes them more vulnerable to so many different things. So if you can just change your sunscreen from a chemical-based sunscreen to what is called a mineral-based sunscreen, it's just about reading the labels. You want to look for titanium dioxide, you want to look for non-nano zinc oxide, no parabens, no microbeads. That's just the most simple thing that we can do to change the way that we affect the ocean. Sometimes it feels like climate change is so out of control and so many of the things going on in the ocean are so beyond our control. It feels like this giant issue that we can't deal with. But one of my favorite quotes is by marine biologist Sylvia Earle. It's broken down like this. She says, basically, every breath that we take, every drop of water that we drink connects us back to the ocean. So it doesn't matter where we live, we are connected back to the ocean. And if this coral goes away, then what happens is that the life that lives there goes away. 80% of the oxygen that we breathe comes out of the ocean. And so our ocean is absorbing 2/3 of the carbon dioxide, and coral is actually part of that process that's absorbing that carbon dioxide and producing oxygen for us to breathe. So what we are doing here is actively rescuing coral. We're working in 3 different ways to monitor coral, rescue coral, and to even begin to work with some artificial reef systems that can begin to sustain living reef systems. And what you can do, very simply, is think about the way that you disregard your trash, think about the sunscreen that you use, and just learn more about this topic and how to take better care of the ocean and the coral that lives within it.
All right, thanks everybody for hanging out with us today at the Reef Institute in West Palm Beach, Florida. You can check us out at www.reefinstitute.org. Again, I'm Dr. Charlie Gregory. This is Lenita Fix. Come visit us. We do snorkel tours. In the meantime, remember, protect the ocean, celebrate the ocean.